One time I was in San Francisco at the Museum of Modern Art. There was this exhibit. I can't find any pictures of it. If you can imagine a large white gallery room about half the size of a basketball court, with cubby holes cut into the wall. Each square insert was framed into the wall with a box at eye level in a single row along each wall of the room. The holes were covered with a stretched, dried stomach lining of either a sheep or cow stitched into the wall, into the drywall with thick black twine. It gave the exhibit an especially macabre feel. The gut was stretched tight like the skin of a drum, so much that it was translucent and you could see a murky vision of the contents of the cubby holes. Each recessed square contained at least one shoe. Some were the shoes of a man, some of a woman, some kids' low-top Velcro sneakers, and even the occasional tiny boot of a baby. Some of the cubby-like holes bore multiple pairs of shoes, some only one. Now, this is a modern art museum, so you never really know what to expect about what you're looking at when you're seeing the art. This one led you through in a line around the room, peering into hole after hole, seeing shoe after shoe. Some of them were quite old, an older style, leather high top here and there, the slight cracked leather of a faded pump. At the end of the exhibit, as you're on your way out of the room, there's a sign that tells you what you've been looking at. As you walk up to the sign, you could see people clutching their mouths, some were even crying. The note on the wall explained that you had just seen the shoes of a small portion of people who were kidnapped on the streets of Colombia and disappeared, never to be seen again. And then you turn around and look back at all of the shoes, all of the holes. I mean, there's more than 100. And then it flashes in your head, the boot of the little baby.
A menos de 200 metros del edificio de ladrillos sin cubrir donde vivía Maruja con su esposo y uno de sus hijos. Habían empezado apenas a subir la cuesta empinada de la calle cuando el taxi amarillo rebasó el automóvil de Maruja, lo cerró contra la acera izquierda y el chofer tuvo que frenar en seco para no chocar. Casi al mismo tiempo, el Mercedes estacionó detrás y lo dejó sin posibilidades de reversa. 3 hombres bajaron del taxi y se dirigieron con paso resuelto al automóvil de Maruja.
The moon bathes death in a light that makes him look like a white star, twinkling in the middle of the backyard.
Colombia has 2 economies. The average Colombian worker makes about $6,000 a year in US dollars. A home in the colonial neighborhood of Bogota called La Candelaria will run you north of $2 million US. The reason is obvious: cocaine and the drug war. People always think of Colombia as a party city, and it is to a point, but it's a lot more toned down than Los Angeles, to be honest. The truth is that most Colombians are rather conservative. When you say Colombia, people instantly think of cocaine. But the majority of Colombians I met hated cocaine because of what it's done to their country. The current exchange rate for US dollars to the Colombian peso is 3,700 pesos to $1. Imagine for a second how you would feel if someone gave you a peso and you had to fork over nearly $4,000 for it. Or even worse, imagine someone gave you a peso and you had to give them 3 arrow straight 2x4s. This is my friend, Alegria. She runs a small hostel in Bogota, in the old colonial neighborhood. Over the years of my visits, we became friends. I would accompany her on various excursions out of the city, including this trip to a cathedral built in a salt mine just outside of Bogota, 600 feet below the surface of the earth. One night we were all hanging out and she said to me, "You know, you've never really seen a bad part of Bogota. I'm gonna take you to a bad neighborhood so that you can see what it's like for people living there." This was at night at about 10 o'clock. Her and I loaded into her off-brand minivan that looked like it would have had a Made in Vietnam sticker on the bottom of it. We drove up the street from her place, exactly 1 block, made a right-hand turn, and stopped at a stoplight. "You're gonna see what it's really like for the poor people of this neighborhood," she said. Just then the light turned green, and we drove around about another block. As we turned the corner, the road opened up to a large traffic circle type of interchange. There were about 300 people in the street engaged in a full-blown riot, or some kind of street war. People were throwing bottles and rocks through the air at one another. It was getting dangerous fast. "We've got to get out of here now," she said as she threw the bus in reverse. The headlamps of the car splashed light on the rioters, and just then, a single solitary bottle flew through the air toward the car, smashing just in front of us.
Start the engine! Get it up! Start the engine!
She hit the gas hard, gears grinding into place. The engine made the sound of a wind-up toy as she pressed the pedal and gas in reverse. Luckily, there was no one behind us. We sped off into the windy hills of the night, all 3 cylinders pressed to full power, firing off into the darkness. I took these 2 photos standing in nearly the exact same spot, firing the shutter, only days apart from one another. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times.
Live in peace with your pipe, with mellow Virginia.
In Hollywood, when you have a star on the Walk of Fame and you pass away, the editors would send me out to take photos of your star and the placement of a wreath of roses in remembrance of your art. I've done this for a lot of different stars over the years. Occasionally I end up in a news bite.
Well, I think that she just had that kind of like attitude, you know, that was just really wholesome, you know, and she was just kind of really beautiful, you know, and that was just, she was the quintessential American actress at the time.
Most of the time I try to stay off camera. I mean, the editors didn't send me to Colombia to go to a protest. I was on vacation. But when I heard that there was going to be a protest in the Simón Bolívar Square, people told me it was dangerous and that I shouldn't go. I shouldn't have told me that. When I told them that I was gonna go, they were like asking, why?
Because I'm a stud. I'm ballsy. I don't take no shit from anyone.
Plus, as soon as I get there, this is the first shot I take. I mean, if these two ladies can be there, right? Some of you will remember I said that I bought my first pipe, a Peterson Black Billiard, in the 90s from my friend James at the Tinderbox. Well, this is James here. He actually came with me to Colombia at the time. The protest was in support of local farmers who were being pushed out by corporate farming conglomerates, Monsanto seed issues, and the loss of their land. A lot of the same issues that I'd seen in India, Mexico, and even the United States. The big fish eat the little ones, if you haven't heard. There had been extensive protests across the country that day. Some had turned violent. Remember, this country is still at war. Sure, the revolution had mostly petered out in the capital, but in Cali, the rebels were always only 30 miles away. The governor had militarized the streets, tanks began to roll out, and soldiers were everywhere. This was Bogota, in Simón Bolívar Square, which holds Colombian parliament, the presidential residence, and the Supreme Court. Things were about to get interesting. When we first arrived to the square, a large crowd of a little over 1,000 people had gathered. Most were just standing around, watching, waiting to see what would happen. There was only one group that was causing a commotion near the entrance of the Colombian Supreme Court. A cadre of younger men wearing masks had formed up and were attacking the police with little missiles, hurling small rocks, paint grenades, and bottles. This is 2013, by the way, before there was any public edict to wear a mask. These guys were trying to hide their identities. When I first saw them, they had overtaken a barricade and were using it to shelter themselves from incoming rubber bullets or from the line of police protecting the courthouse. Now, I'm thinking, these guys are obviously agents provocateurs, right? I mean, they're trying to harass the cops in a pretty obvious attempt to try and provoke a response, to use the crowd against itself. I needed to get closer. I had to document this to show what was happening. This was a peaceful, I dare say cheerful gathering of Colombians in support of a common cause, and here was this group of radicals trying to cause a riot, trying to literally use the crowd against itself. I needed to get closer, but I knew that the sight of a big white guy in a Red Sox hat would definitely provoke a rock or two to be thrown in my direction. These were clearly Yankees fans. At this point, James put his hand on my shoulder and said, "All right, this is too close. We've got to get out of here. It's about to get wild." He didn't even get a chance to land the D in wild before you heard that terrible sound of gas canisters popping out of their launchers. At first breath, military-grade tear gas is some pretty spicy stuff. The smoke is thick and oily. I would rate the heat level at about 10 habaneros being rubbed in your eyes. The smoke goes all the way deep down into your lungs as you breathe, and in a forceful manner. Imagine putting your entire mouth over the muffler of a diesel bus and then taking a full deep breath as it revs the engine, pouring the thick smoke into your lungs. Then add the heat of the habaneros and begin to approximate the sensation. The secret to surviving the gas is to not panic and try to take shallow breaths because it hurts when you breathe too deeply. I had run in the opposite direction of the crowd to the southwest corner of the square. Alegria's place was only about 1,000 feet up a steep hill, and due to the fact that I had stopped to take photos, I ended up being one of the last people to exit the square. As I rounded the corner, the launchers fired again over our heads. We were trapped in the gas. A small group of us huddled in the corner. A college-age kid standing next to me collapsed on the ground. After taking this photo, we drew the attention of one of the paramilitaries, and he carried the young man off to medical attention, hopefully. As we all sat there together, the last to exit the square, we all looked at each other. Their eyes were a little perplexed at the sight of an American. And all I could do was laugh. And I said, "Viva Colombia." And they all laughed as well.
Mild, smooth Erinmore. Your secret's safe with us.
After a story like that, a fella could really use a little tobacco to take the edge off. And most people who reach for the Erinmore go for the Flake. They make a big deal about how it's different than the mixture. I mean, that's true. Some say if you like the Flake that you'll also enjoy Benson & Hedges Mellow Virginia. If you remember the other tobacco commercial from earlier, I think it's called Special Virginia these days. Anyway, they say it's like the Flake but with more topping. There's a lot of debate about which is better, Erinmore Flake or mixture. Some prefer the darkness and richness of the Flake, and others prefer the lighter, more floral touch of the mixture. I highly recommend stocking both. The mixture for the floral notes and spring, and the Flake for a classic Virginia burley taste all year. I honestly can't say which I prefer more. However, I did run out of the Flake first. But the mixture tin is larger, so consider that how you will. And I've shared a lot of harrowing stories about my time in Colombia, but really they happened over a long period, over many different visits to the country. I don't want to scare anyone off. You know, if Alegria ever sees this video, she's gonna be pissed because she hates for people to think about Colombia as violent, so sorry in advance to Alegria. But, I met, honestly, a ton of European and American young ladies in their 20s, traveling by themselves, looking to hook up with a Colombian salsa dancer. I mean, if they can do it, so can you. Don't be put off by a little spicy air. Don't worry, Jack, it won't mess with your menstrual cycle.
Women who have been to these protests several nights and are seeing differences in their menstrual cycle.
Colombia is an amazing place. I have two friends who met the loves of their lives down there and got married. James is one of them. He spent the last 10 years living in Colombia, where he has a wife and a child. He had to smuggle them out of Cali in a box during the event. He's currently living back in California and is working to earn enough money to protect his family until he can get back down there. I actually just saw him last week. He's the captain of a 76-foot multi-million-dollar yacht parked in Marina del Rey. There's a lot of tension going on in Colombia right now, and I can't wait to get back down there, but I mean, there's tanks on the street, so I'm keeping them in my prayers and hoping that everything's gonna be okay. There's a poem that always reminded me of Colombia. It's by a Cuban writer named Reynaldo Arenas. I'll leave you with it here. Take care, everybody, and God bless.
Yo soy ese niño desagradable, sin duda inoportuno, de cara redonda y sucia que ante los grandes faroles, o bajo las grandes damas tan bien iluminadas, o ante las niñas que parecen levitar, proyecta el insulto de su cara redonda y sucia. I am that angry and lowly child of always, that throws you the insult of that angry child of always and warns you. If hypocritically you pat me on the head, I would take that opportunity to steal your wallet. I am that child of always, before the panorama of imminent terror, imminent leprosy, imminent fleas, of offenses and imminent crime. I am that repulsive child that improvises a bed out of an old cardboard box and waits, certain that you will accompany me.